Yeah, welcome back. Now, job losses is not only confined to the mining industry. According to the Metal and Engineering Industries Bargaining Council, the MEIBC, the steel industry has lost 150,000 jobs over the last 10 years, of which 40,000 jobs were lost in 2015 and 9,000 alone in November of that year. Now, the MEIBC is predicting a further 30,000 job losses. The National Employers Association of South Africa, NEASA, represents 2,500 small businesses in the steel industry. NEASA's chief executive, Mr. Gerhard Papenfus, says government should appoint a judicial commission of inquiry to determine the state of the steel industry. Now, Mr. Papenfus is with us in studio. Very good morning to you, Mr. Papenfus. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Always nice to have you back with us. Just explain to me what you mean with this judicial commission of inquiry into the steel industry, and how do you see this improving conditions?
There are more than one reason for the state of the metal industry. We've been arguing for quite a long time for fundamental changes which need to be brought about to bring about change and bring sustainability into the industry. But, you know, there's simply not the political will to do that. Our calls fall on deaf ears. And there's a fundamental thing that happens in bargaining councils. And that is that the Labour Relations Act is drafted in a way that eliminates the voice of SMMEs. What happens is that big employers, which the percentage of the cost of labour is as low as 7% of turnover, they make a deal and extend that deal to a small business somewhere else, whose cost of labour is as high as 60%. Now, those employers have a dominant say in the bargaining council system. And we call on the minister to change that. And as we sit here today, this is happening again. Because what's happening? The trade unions focus on bigger business for strike action. They say we can't afford it, they budge, they give into those deals, extend it. And then the signatories to those deals make an application for exemption to those deals. Now, this is costing this industry these jobs. That's not the only reason. There are other reasons. The issue of steel, that's also an issue. So what we say is that if a commission inquiry is appointed and investigate this thing and then make a recommendation to Parliament, maybe that will carry weight.
I wanted to talk to you about SMMEs a little bit, because we're always told that small and medium enterprises is going to be the battleground that's going to create jobs, and it's going to stop unemployment in South Africa. As the entity that represents them, or a large percentage of them, do you believe that today?
It's supposed to be like that. In growing economies, that is the case. It's not the case here, although the prediction is that currently up to 90% of businesses employ less than 10 employees. Now, that might be not correct, it might be less than 15, but it says already, but you know, that's statistics we see. But that number can increase tremendously, but there is not a single measure put in place that actually promotes it and makes it easier. All we see is that how we can make it more difficult for these guys. Now, you know, a small business don't have the luxury to play around with things. Every form you need to fill in costs money. If you apply for an exemption, for instance, for a wage arrangement in a bargaining council, you must find somebody, pay that person, and from Kakamas, send in an application and wait in agony for... So, a government that's going to be clever in this regard will loosen the hands of small business. So that they may one day might become big business. But there is nothing except handouts for startups. And you know, if there's handouts for startups, they fail. There's a tough way to start a business, and unless you go through that path into business, you don't learn. You can't give a guy R1 million and say start up a business. He'll waste that R1 million before he even starts. He just can't do it.
Now, you are on record as saying that minimum wage of 4,000 to 4,500 Rand in South Africa would lead to job losses. Explain to us that concept and how it plays out for the small businesses especially.
Okay, the fact is the minimum wage that's been announced is 3,500.
Yeah.
But let's talk on the principle of the introduction of a minimum wage. Especially in rural areas where we need jobs, people don't pay that wage. They simply cannot pay that wage. And the moment you can't pay it, you'll get rid of a person. You either get rid of him or reduce his working hours or go underground. Just disappear from the screen. But if you can't, you will dismiss people. So we believe it will lead to joblessness. And it's not covering for business to abuse. The argument is not to cover for business to abuse employees. It's an issue of what are we going to do with the ever-increasing unemployment rate? So we need people. If a person comes to you and says, "Sir, I want to work for you for 2,000 Rand a month, and I'm prepared." Now, the argument is, but that's abuse. But if the person that pays it can only pay that, well, that's a moral predicament. So I can't employ you, sir, because I can only, and I tell you, in rural areas, that is happening now. So, but these people are not necessarily going to dismiss people. They will simply continue paying them that. The formal businesses in small areas, they will dismiss.
You mentioned the critical one, that it's open for abuse, and of course it will always be abused. Okay. How do you mitigate that if you say so? And as government, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to regulate that and to stop the abuses.
You know, if in a free market dispensation, there will always be abuse. You can't do that, but I'm not saying...
The capitalists always tell me the same thing.
Well, there will always be abuse, but good business people pay well. And they are good business people because they pay well. They are not good business, they don't pay because they're successful. They become successful because they paid well. You cannot retain very good employees unless you pay well. And that is the thing where the market determines the outcome, where the market arranges itself. So if you have the guy, if you ask an employee, you either want to sit at home or earn a very small salary. One will say, I'll rather stay at home. Another one will say, you know, even if that employer abuses me, at least that is a learning experience, even with to cope with that person, because he learns a skill which he can take to another guy. But if he doesn't have that skill, how does he present himself to the other guy? So I'm not in favor of abuse, but if we start looking for all the abuse there is, you'll find some. But let me tell you, I can show you workplaces, a lot of them where employers do not abuse. But the moment you regulate the market to this extent, you lose jobs, because at the end of the day, an employer decides what he wants to pay.
Unfortunately, we are in the 21st century, Mr. Papenfus, and you're going to have to stop the abuses, and we're going to have to stick to the Labour Relations Act. That's just the way it is.
Well, you know, if I talk to about abuse, what is abuse? If an employee offers his service, says, I want to work for you for 2,000, I'll just mention a figure, and you're a small businessman and you say, you know, I need assistance. I'm only starting to get out of the tracks. That's what I can afford. Who is a government to say you're not allowed to make that arrangement? Isn't that abuse? Isn't that unconstitutional? Doesn't that infringe on the right to work?
You asking for an entire restructuring of the Labour Relations Act, which is not going to happen because we're too far down the road with this thing. I want to ask you about what's happening in the steel industry.
Yeah.
There's job cuts, more job cuts looming. If you could give me your outlook for the next 5 years, what would that look like?
It will continue. And, you know, let me tell you what's going to happen. Regardless of what the Act prescribes on bargaining councils, the weakness of big business is the reason for the job cuts. NEASA, in this case, is making demands that's double. The current wage in the metal industry is already double the number that isn't applicable in other industries, double. That is the most expensive industry in South Africa, and the reason it's happened is weak employers giving in to the demands of NEASA in particular. Now, NEASA has picked them out now. They know them now. They know they're going to get what they want.
Yeah.
Those employers will budge, and I will come back to this show in this round of negotiations, even if they didn't budge, and I will come and apologize to them. I will do that. They will try again to extend, and it will lead to more job losses. The industry is unaffordable, and it was negotiated into unaffordability by employers. And I can see the trend, what is happening here. I can see the guys' knees getting shaky, buckling. I can see that. They're dead scared.
Yeah.
While the guys are standing outside the gates and screaming. No, they're not screaming as yet. They say it's coming, and the guys' knees are buckling already. So we're making this industry more and more and more expensive. Employers tell me, big guys say, we will sign an agreement and we will retrench immediately thereafter. They're not with me. They support me in quiet.
Yeah.
These are the guys that's costing this industry drop. The industry is simply too expensive. And there are other issues as well. I've just raised one of the big issues there.
Well, Mr. Papenfus, we've run out of time. We could have this argument again and again and again. And next time, I suppose, I'm going to have to bring NEASA in to come and sit with you and talk about these things, because they have the complete opposite view to you.
Well, I think that will be a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you for joining us today. Mr. Gerhard Papenfus is the Chief Executive Officer of NEASA here in South Africa.